Bikers threaten a woman on an empty road. What she does next leaves them stunned. The roar of motorcycle engines shattered the stillness of the countryside. A group of bikers tore down the empty highway, their leather jackets flapping in the wind. They were the Hellhounds, feared by all who knew of them. Led by the ruthless Spike, they left a trail of intimidation wherever they rode. As they rounded a bend, a lone car came into view, a silver sedan crawling along the road. Spike signaled to his gang and they surrounded the vehicle, revving their engines menacingly. The car slowed to a stop and a woman stepped out. She appeared to be in her early 40s, with shoulder-length brown hair and a calm expression. Well, what do we have here?" Spike said, dismounting his bike and swaggering over. His gang formed a circle around the woman and her car. "Looks like someone's lost." The woman met his gaze steadily. "I'm not lost. I'm exactly where I need to be." Spike's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to such confidence from his victims. "Is that so? Well, you picked the wrong road today. This here's Hellhound territory. And if you want to pass, you gotta pay the toll." The biker to his left, a hulking man named Mahler, cracked his knuckles threateningly. "That's a real nice ride you got there," he said, eyeing the sedan with a greedy expression. But the woman seemed unperturbed by their menacing presence. She reached slowly into her purse, causing the bikers to tense. But instead of a weapon, she pulled out a police badge. "Melissa Walker, retired state trooper," she said calmly. "You boys picked the wrong woman to mess with today." Spike stared at the badge, momentarily taken aback, then let out a bark of laughter. "Retired pig? Huh? Well, your badge don't mean squat out here. We're the law now." The other bikers joined in his laughter, but Melissa remained composed. "I'm going to give you one chance," she said. "Ride away now and we can forget this ever happened." "Or what?" Spike sneered. "You'll arrest us? In case you haven't noticed, you're a little outnumbered." Melissa's hand drifted to her waist and the bikers tensed, reaching for weapons. But she merely unclipped a cell phone from her belt. "I don't need to arrest you," she said. "I just need to make one call. You see, I still have friends on the force." "How do you think they'll react to a gang of bikers threatening a lone woman on a highway?" Doubt flickered across some of the bikers' faces, and they glanced at Spike uncertainly. But their leader just sneered. "You're bluffing. No badge is gonna stick their neck out for some washed-up trooper." He took a step forward, looming over Melissa. "Now hand over the keys to that car before I dash." Melissa moved like lightning. Her hand shot forward, striking a pressure point on Spike's wrist. He yelped in pain and stumbled back, clutching his arm. In the same motion, Melissa drew a can of pepper spray from her purse and brandished it at the other bikers. "The next one of you that makes a move gets a face full of this," she warned. The Hellhounds froze, eyeing the spray warily. Spike glared at her, humiliated fury burning in his eyes. "This ain't over," he growled. "Nobody disrespects the Hellhounds like this." "It's over if I say it is," Melissa replied coldly. "Now get on your bikes and ride away while you still can." For a long moment, the two stared each other down. Then, with a muttered curse, Spike turned away. "Let's go," he snarled to his gang. "This bitch isn't worth it." Shooting venomous looks at Melissa, the bikers mounted up and gunned their engines. With a screeching of tires, they roared off down the highway, soon disappearing from view. Melissa watched them go, her face an expressionless mask. Then, with a shake of her head, she got back into her car and drove on. She had won this battle, but she knew the war was just beginning. As she continued down the lonely highway, Melissa's mind drifted to what had led her to this moment. Just a few days prior, she had been living a quiet life in the city, her days as a state trooper long behind her. But then she had received the call that changed everything. Her niece Jenny, a 19-year-old college student, had gone missing on a road trip to visit friends in the next state over. Her last known location? A small gas station just outside the town the Hellhounds claimed as their turf. Melissa had immediately volunteered to investigate, much to the concern of her family. "I'm retired, not helpless," she had assured them. "I still know how to handle myself." Now, as she drove into the small, shabby town, She wondered if those words would prove true. The place had a defeated air about it. The businesses on the main street with faded facades and deserted parking lots. It was clear this was a community living under a shadow of fear. Melissa pulled into the gas station and strode inside, the bell above the door announcing her arrival with a cheerful jingle completely at odds with her mood. The elderly clerk behind the counter looked up warily. "Help you with something?" he asked, his guarded tone suggesting he was used to trouble. Melissa showed him a photo of Jenny, a smiling girl with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. "I'm looking for my niece. She was last seen here a few days ago. Remember her?" The clerk studied the photo for a long moment, then shook his head. "Can't say I do. We get a lot of folks passing through here." Melissa leaned forward, fixing him with a piercing stare. "I know the hellhounds prowl this area," she said quietly. "I had a run-in with them earlier. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The clerk paled and his eyes darted to the door as if afraid the bikers might burst in at any moment. "I don't want no trouble," he said nervously. "Folks around here learned not to ask too many questions. If you get my meaning." Melissa sighed, her frustration evident. "I'm not trying to make trouble for you. I just want to find my niece. If you know anything." The clerk hesitated, then leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard some of them talking the other day. They mentioned a girl, blonde hair. Said they were going to take her up to the old abandoned camp in the woods. Have some fun with her." A cold fury settled over Melissa and her fists clenched at her sides. "Where is this camp?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. The clerk told her and Melissa thanked him curtly before striding out. As she stepped out into the daylight, she drew herself up, turning her face to the warm sun. The battle lines had been drawn, sides chosen. She was in Hellhound territory now, and she wouldn't leave until she had found Jenny and made Spike and his gang pay for their crimes, no matter the cost. The abandoned campground was a relic of better days, when families from the city would retreat to the countryside for summer getaways. Now, as Melissa stepped into the clearing, the place held a haunted air. The few remaining cabins sagged with neglect, their windows dark portals into the past. Melissa moved cautiously, her senses on high alert. The campground was eerily quiet, devoid of even birdsong, as if nature itself feared to speak. As she approached the central cabin, a lone crow on the roof spread its wings and took flight with a mocking caw. She tensed, whirling around, and found herself face to face with Spike. The Hellhound leader stood flanked by Mahler and the rest of his gang, their expressions twisted into sneers of cruel amusement. "Well, looky here, boys. We got ourselves a lost little piggy," Spike crowed. "Squeal for me, piggy." The bikers let out a chorus of mocking laughter, revving their engines menacingly. Melissa stood her ground, years of training keeping her outwardly calm despite the hammering of her heart. "Where's the girl, Spike?" she demanded. "Where's Jenny?" Spike feigned confusion. "Jenny? I don't know no Jenny. Do you, boys?" The gang shook their heads and shrugged, their laughter taking on a crueler edge. "Cut the crap. I know you took her." Melissa fought down the rising tide of fear and anger that threatened to choke her. "If you've hurt her?" "Hurt her? Now why would we go and do a thing like that?" Spike asked, his voice dripping with mock innocence. "We're just friendly folk looking to show a pretty little thing a good time. Ain't that right?" Hoots and hollers of agreement rose from the gang. Melissa felt her stomach turn with revulsion and fury. "I'm not going to ask again," she said slowly, each word sharp and precise. "Where is Jenny?" But Spike just laughed, cold and merciless. "You want her? Come and get her." At his signal, the Hellhounds spread out, circling Melissa like a pack of wolves closing in on wounded prey. She pivoted, trying to keep them all in view, knowing she was hopelessly outnumbered. Then a muffled scream split the air, emanating from the central cabin. Melissa's blood turned to ice. Jenny, abandoning all pretense of calm, she charged forward, aiming straight for Spike. The biker braced himself, anticipating her attack, but at the last second she feinted left and dove past him, sprinting for the cabin door. Curses and shouts of alarm erupted behind her. The Hellhounds scrambled to give chase, But Melissa had the lead now. She crashed through the door, following the sound of desperate, terrified screams. She burst into the back room to find Jenny tied to a chair, her face streaked with tears and a gag stuffed in her mouth. Two bikers stood guard over her, their faces ugly with guilt and malice. Melissa didn't hesitate. Snatching up a rusted fireplace poker, she laid into the startled bikers with raw maternal fury. The first went down with a sickening crunch of breaking bone. The second fumbled for his knife, but Melissa knocked it away and delivered a devastating blow to his temple. He crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. With trembling hands, she tore the gag from Jenny's mouth and began working on her bonds. The girl sobbed with relief, clinging to her aunt. "I've got you," Melissa murmured, blinking away her own tears. "I've got you." The thunder of boots in the outer room alerted her to the approach of the rest of the gang. Melissa dragged Jenny to her feet. "We have to go now." Supporting the shaking girl, she peered out the door. Spike was leading his men into the cabin, their faces twisted with rage. There would be no escape that way. Melissa's eyes fell on the rear window, caked in grime. It would be a tight fit, but it was their only chance. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed a rickety chair and hurled it at the window with all her strength. The glass shattered in an explosion of shards and the cool breeze of freedom rushed in. Not daring to look back, Melissa boosted Jenny through the opening and dove after her into the unknown. They ran, crashing through the thick undergrowth of the forest, heedless of the branches that tore at their clothes and skin. Behind them, the furious shouts of the hellhounds grew louder as they discovered the empty cabin and broken window. "Split up," Melissa heard Spike bellow. "Find them!" Engines roared to life and headlights split the dimness of the woods as the bikers took up the hunt. Jenny was flagging, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but Melissa urged her on ruthlessly. They couldn't afford to slow down, not with the hellhounds closing in. They broke from the tree line and found themselves on a narrow dirt road. In the distance, Melissa could make out the lights of the highway. If they could just make it there, flag down a passing car. But a dreadful sense of familiarity washed over her as she realized where they were. This was the same lonely stretch of road where she had first encountered Spike and his gang. Out here, they were as good as trapped. The roar of motorcycles grew louder and Melissa saw the bikers approaching from both ends of the road, headlights blazing. They were cutting off any hope of escape. She pushed Jenny behind her, shielding the terrified girl with her own body. "Stay behind me," she ordered. No matter what happens, the hellhounds encircled them, engines idling with a predatory purr. Spike dismounted from his bike and stalked forward, fury emanating from him like a physical force. "Thought you could get away from us?" he snarled. "Thought you could disrespect the hellhounds and walk away?" Melissa met his gaze steadily, unwilling to show even a flicker of the fear that threatened to consume her. "It's over, Spike," she said, her voice carrying across the night air. "Let us go. Haven't you done enough?" Spike let out a short, ugly bark of laughter. "I'll tell you when it's over," he spat. He nodded to Mahler and the other bikers. "Grab the girl. We'll teach little Miss Retired Pig a lesson she won't forget." The bikers closed in, cruel smiles stretching their faces into inhuman masks. Melissa braced herself, ready to fight to her last breath, and then the night exploded with light and sound. Cars screeched onto the scene from both ends of the road, red and blue lights flashing. A bullhorn blared. "This is the police. Drop your weapons and put your hands on your head." Spike whirled around, shock and rage warring on his face. "What the hell?" Uniformed officers poured out of the cars, leveling guns at the bikers. On the ground now, they barked. For a moment, the hellhounds hesitated, glancing at their leader for guidance. Spike's face contorted in a snarl of defiance. Then his eyes met Melissa's and saw the triumphant gleam there. Realization dawned in his expression. "You set us up," he hissed. Melissa allowed herself a small, grim smile. "I told you I still had friends on the force, Spike. Did you really think I came out here without backup?" Defeated, Spike slowly raised his hands in surrender, his gang following suit. As the officers moved in to cuff them, Melissa turned to hug a sobbing Jenny, murmuring assurances. Over the girl's shoulder, she met the eyes of the lead detective, an officer she recognized from her days on the force. He nodded to her, respect and gratitude clear in his gaze. Melissa nodded back, feeling a sense of bittersweet triumph. The Hellhound's reign of terror was over. Her town, her people were free. But as she held her shaking niece, she knew the scars of their ordeal would linger long after the bruises faded. Healing would take time, but for now, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel the knot of tension inside her begin to loosen. The nightmare was over. A new day could finally dawn. In the days that followed, the impact of the Hellhound's downfall rippled through the small town like a stone dropped in a still pond. Slowly, tentatively, as if scarcely daring to believe their long nightmare was truly over, the people began to emerge from the shadows of fear that had held them captive for so long. Melissa watched it all with a sense of profound pride and relief. She saw it in the way people walked down the street with their heads held high, no longer glancing over their shoulders in constant dread. She saw it in the way shuttered businesses tentatively reopened, hope reawakening in the tired eyes of the proprietors. Most of all, she saw it in Jenny, the girl who had clung to her that terrifying night, who had sobbed in her arms as if her heart was breaking, was slowly beginning to piece herself back together. There was a new strength in her eyes, a quiet resilience that spoke of the lessons hard learned. "I want to be like you," Jenny told her one afternoon as they sat together in the dappled shade of an old oak tree. "I want to help people, to make a difference." Melissa felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You will," she assured the girl, squeezing her hand. "You already have, just by surviving, by not letting them break you." Jenny managed a shaky smile. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the weeks passed and the town began to heal, Melissa found her role shifting from warrior to mentor, from protector to guide. She took Jenny under her wing, teaching her the skills and strengths that had seen her through her own darkest days. Together, they began to reach out to others who had suffered under the Hellhound's reign of terror. They organized support groups, community watch programs, self-defense classes. Slowly but surely, they helped stitch back together the tattered fabric of trust and safety that had been so brutally rent. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt and fear and sorrow. But every time they faltered, every time the shadows threatened to close back in, Melissa and Jenny were there to lean on each other, to light the way forward. And the town responded, united by their shared trauma and their determination never to be victims again. The once cowed and broken citizens found new purpose, new strength in each other. The change was reflected in ways big and small. An elderly lady who had once barricaded herself inside her home now walked each evening to her neighbors, bearing trays of fresh-baked cookies. A reclusive veteran began teaching free car repair classes to anyone who asked. The high school kids started a graffiti cleanup crew, determined to erase the last traces of the Hellhounds from their streets. Melissa watched it all with a heart near to bursting with fierce love and pride. This was her town, her people. They had been beaten down, but they had not been broken. From the ashes of despair, they were building something new, something stronger. And at the center of it all, the beating heart of this remarkable transformation, were two women, an aunt and her niece. Their bond forged in the crucible of shared pain and unbreakable love. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange and gold, Melissa and Jenny stood together on the overlook above the town. The place that had once been a haunt of fear and darkness was now reclaimed, a spot of beauty and peace. "Look at what you've done," Melissa said softly. "Look at what you've helped build." Jenny slipped a hand into hers, her fingers strong and sure. "What we've built," she corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Aunt Melissa. You saved me. In every way a person can be saved." Melissa squeezed her hand, blinking back sudden tears. "We saved each other," she said roughly. They fell silent then, gazing out over the town as the last light faded from the sky. The shadows lengthened, but they held no terror now. What had once been a place of darkness was now a haven of light, of hope and healing and new beginnings. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, recovery never was. But they would walk it together, hand in hand, step by step into the dawning of a brighter future. From the depths of fear, in the face of overwhelming odds, the love between an aunt and her niece had sparked a transformation. It had given a broken town back its heart, its strength, its hope. And that was a gift beyond measure, a light that would endure long after the darkness had passed.